I'm Matt, a journalist working at a publishing company. I'm in my 16th year with the company, turning 38 this year. After graduating from college, I moved to the big city, chasing a dream in the publishing world. Since joining the company, I have devoted my entire life to my work, in order to obtain a life in the city that is the envy of everyone. But despite my savvy efforts, reality hit hard. I remained an average, stuck with dull editing and proofreading tasks. Life at work and at home lacked fulfillment, and I grew increasingly fed up with it every day. Matt, yes. One lunchtime, I got called in by my boss. It seems the sales of our travel magazine are dipping. The usual features won't keep the readers around. Spice up the content of the articles a bit, will you? Yes, sorry about that. Our company is a general publisher, dealing with a wide variety of magazines. I handle a travel magazine that covers tourist spots in each state, but this type of content often overlaps with what other companies publish, which is a drawback as it tends to become stale. Have you been delegating the on-site research to your juniors lately? Yes. I mainly check and proofread the draft articles for the magazine. When I was new to the company, I used to visit the sites myself and travel around the country to do interviews. But by this age I had more junior staff and no longer had to take on the tedious task of interviewing people. In truth, visiting tourist spots in various places would yield the same results no matter who went. I did not want to do labor-intensive work. Isn't the reason you can't write engaging articles because you've been relying too much on your juniors for the research? My boss had seen right through my slacking off, and I ended up getting lectured about my work attitude. Indeed, the magazine's sales had been notably declining, often becoming a point of discussion in company meetings. If next month's sales don't improve, I'm considering transferring you to the General Affairs Department. What? No. The General Affairs Department was known in our publishing department as a catch-all for odd jobs and errands. There is a lot of work involved, and overtime is commonplace. It was obvious that it was a lot of troublesome work. If you don't like the sound of that, how about you do the on-site research yourself for a change? Me? Yes. Instead of leaving it all to the juniors, why don't you cover tourist spots that you'd personally recommend to our readers? Okay, I'll do it. When the boss orders, a regular employee like me has no right to refuse. The research for next month's article was already done, so any new article I write would only be published the month after next. Little did I know that the quality of the article would determine my fate. That evening, I returned to my one-bedroom apartment and collected the mail that had piled up in my mailbox. There were ads for real estate, newspaper subscriptions, and flyers for the local supermarket's flash sale. As I skimmed through them, I found a postcard tucked among the ads. What's this? On the back, it read, "Notice of Riversdale High School class reunion," with the date, time, and venue, along with a section to confirm attendance and the organizer's contact details. A high school reunion. I can't believe I'm getting an invite after all this time. It's been 16 years since I left for the city. I come from the middle of nowhere. From a village on a remote island, no less. Just getting to the mainland takes a 2-hour ferry ride. Life on that tiny, cramped island was peaceful in a way, but without any thrills. It felt unsatisfying. That's why I hated the countryside and quickly left for the city, where I was going to have a rich life that would be the envy of the country people on the island. Back home, the usual paths were either moving to the city or staying on the island to work. Mostly, those were the only options. Many of my classmates did not leave their familiar rural villages. Some took over family businesses that had been running for generations, while others got married following village customs. In a way, it was a carefree country life, but as a young man I had ambitions. Going against my parents' and relatives' wishes, I left the island alone. Since then, I've felt somewhat reluctant to return, and it's been a long time since I've been back home. I wonder how everyone's doing. Looking at the postcards, I went back to my memories of 20 years ago for the first time in a long time. Among those hazy recollections, there's a page of my youth still sparkling brightly. Next to my family home was a cozy little inn called Halls, and the daughter there, Natalie, was both a childhood friend and classmate of mine. We were close enough to commute to school together whenever we could, and I always harbored a tender affection for her, but never mustered the courage to confess before graduation. After moving to the city, I found out through a call from a close friend that she had secretly liked me back. I regretted not knowing her feelings earlier. I was worried about my parents, but for some reason I was so concerned about Natalie and her family's guest house that I couldn't stand still, so I took a pen out of my commuter bag and circled the attendance column on the postcard. A month later, I was on the ferry back to the island, using an assigned reporting day from work. Although the main reason was to attend a reunion rather than for the assignment, I still took out my reporter's notebook to jot down details of the transportation, cost, and travel time from the city center to the island. Never thought my first assignment in a while would be my own hometown. It was an island where I lived for 20 years, but to me, it was a place without interest, and I struggled with the idea of featuring it in a magazine article. The reunion was being held at the inn next to my family home, Halls. That's precisely why I decided to attend the reunion while visiting home. There's no use reminiscing about my youth or meeting my first love now, but as the reunion approached, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement as I remembered those days. Walking from the harbor to the bus stop and boarding the hourly bus, my destination was just around the corner. Nothing's changed at all. In the city, the scenery changes within a year. It's common for buildings to be renovated to keep up with the latest trends. But this island is different. It's timeless no matter when you visit. The rural landscape, surrounded by nature, seems frozen in time. As the countryside scenery flowed past the bus window, I felt as though my own time was rewinding back to high school. While being rocked by the bus, I took out my notebook and began to scribble a brief introduction to the island. 15 minutes later, getting off the bus, I climbed the familiar uphill path I knew from my school days. Back then, I had the energy to sprint up such slopes, but now just a short walk made me sweat and my breath quicken. After that, I took a casual stroll around the village and made sure I arrived at Hall's place about 20 minutes before the reunion was set to start. Hall's, just like the surrounding scenery, hadn't changed a bit since back in the day, and even the statue that stood guard by the entrance like a gatekeeper for the past 20 years was still there. When it starts to get dim, the light of the lanterns hung at the front entrance would light up, and even that orange glow was just as I remembered. As I put my hand on the door, I could faintly hear laughter leaking from inside. It seemed some of the attendees had already started drinking. With a wry smile to myself, I figured it wasn't too surprising since most of my classmates had stayed on the island and probably couldn't wait to get started. "Welcome, could it be Natalie?" "Huh, that voice, Matt." When I opened the door and stepped into the entryway, there to greet me was Natalie, clad in the inn's uniform, with a bandana wrapped around her head. "You really came." I said I would, didn't I? "It's been a while. You look well." "Yeah, you too, Matt. I heard from the organizer, Jake, that you were coming, but I just couldn't believe it." Natalie, slightly blushing, scratched her cheek with her fingertip and smiled cheerfully. Her smile, with 2 dimples on his cheeks, is still the same. "Thanks so much for coming all this way. It's not like I need to be thanked or anything." As I was caught off guard by Natalie's candid expression, a man dressed in the same uniform as Natalie came walking down the hall towards us. "Good evening, you must be Matt. Nice to meet you. I'm Bob, Natalie's husband." Yeah, nice to meet you, Matt." I was suddenly snapped back to reality when I saw Natalie's neighbor greeting me. Natalie is married. I'd heard through the grapevine that the eldest son of a farming family from the next village over had married with Natalie. I attended the reunion to see Natalie, but it was also to try and get past the regrets of an unrequited first love that I'd harbored since high school. "Looks like everyone else is here except for you, Matt. It's a bit early, but shall we start the reunion?" Natalie said with a smile, assuring me inside. I took off my shoes, stored them in the cubby, and followed her into the hall. Matt, you're late, man. Come on over here, quick. Jake, it's been a while, I said as I sat down next to Jake, who had signaled me over enthusiastically as soon as I entered the banquet hall. Jake was my closest friend since high school, and since moving to the city, the only people I'd kept in touch with were my parents and Jake. Are you doing well? You've really become a city slicker, huh? Wearing such an expensive-looking suit and all. Nah, it's nothing special. Jake had become a fisherman, taking over his family's business after graduating from high school. There were supposed to be 2 other people living in the city attending the reunion, but it seems they canceled last minute due to sudden engagements. I hear you've been slammed at work. Must be a hassle to head back to that tiny island. Moving to the big city has changed you, huh? Yeah, maybe. Sure, city life is flashy and fun, I'll give you that, but the island has its own charm. That's what I believe, anyway. As Jake chugged his beer and talked, I found myself at a loss for words. The other 2 felt much the same, I reckon. This time, it was just a chance to catch up with Natalie while I was home visiting. No denying it, going back to the rural island felt like a drag, that much was clear. Here you go, some more shrimp for you. Oh, I've been waiting for this. While Jake and I were deep in conversation, Natalie came over with a big smile, bringing some freshly prepared shrimp. The table was loaded with luxurious plates of seafood, and the high school friends chat got even more lively. Despite criticizing my hometown as a boring backwater, reminiscing with friends made me strangely buoyant, and before I knew it, I felt my frustrations clearing away. Around these old classmates, I could relax, no need to put on airs. So, how are you doing these days? Me. Yeah, you, Matt. You must be doing well for yourself, right? Tell us some stories about the city. Natalie plopped down between Jake and me, and one by one, the others joined in the conversation. Before I knew it, I became the center of attention. I'm working at a publishing company now. It's busy work, but putting a magazine together with the whole team is pretty rewarding, I'd say. Wow, look at you. Publishing is something way out of reach for a farmer's second son like me. Haha, Matt, you've got a different vibe than the rest of us island bumpkins. I'll admit, before I left for the city, I wanted to prove something to my parents and my classmates back home. I'm not meant to be contained by this countryside, I thought, rebelling and moving to the city. But the reality is, I'm stuck at work, with no remarkable success stories or achievements to boast about. I used to brag about being respected by my juniors or being in the boss's good graces, getting dragged to business golf or nightly drinks, but that was all just to protect my pride. You're cool, Matt. What? All of a sudden, Natalie, sitting next to me, watched me with a smile, chuckling in her typical way. It wasn't just her smile, but her bright laughter and subtle thoughtfulness that were so characteristic of her. Matt, remember how you used to get lost in school all the time? Hey, don't bring that up. That was decades ago. Haha, sorry, it's just nostalgic. Memories from 20 years ago flooded back, and I couldn't help my tearing up a little. After 2 hours, the reunion came to a close, and we headed to the after party at a bar. Good job, everyone. You too. Natalie, aren't you coming to the after party? As classmates started to leave the venue, I noticed Natalie staying behind with her husband, Bob, at their family inn. When they finished cleaning up, I approached them. Hey, Matt, do you want to talk for a bit? With me. I was a bit shaken, not expecting Natalie to ask me out, but once today's reunion and interview is over, I would not be returning to the island for a while. This might be the last chance to talk with Natalie. We sat down on the back porch of the inn, quietly looking out at the garden. Natalie seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, her face downturned. Back in school, she was always the one to break the ice with shy me. Tonight, it was my turn to lead the conversation with Natalie. What's up? This isn't like you, Natalie. Is that so? It's been 16 years since I last saw you. Maybe I'm just nervous. Natalie, you were never the type to be intimidated by anyone. Talk like you used to, no holding back. Yeah, you're right. Natalie lifted her face and turned to me before speaking. Today, honestly, I was really happy. You came to the reunion. Come on, don't exaggerate. No, I'm serious. Our family and might be closing down soon. What? It was a bolt from the blue. As I looked at Natalie with wide eyes, I could see her eyes were beginning to tear up. The number of tourists has been declining over the years, and my parents are getting old. They're thinking of closing the inn. I love this job. I want to keep the inn going. What will you do if the inn closes, Natalie? I guess I'll live with my husband's family. I'll probably help out with the farm work. I see. Watching Natalie clench her hands on her knees in frustration, I could feel just how much she loved the inn. In that moment, a passionate fire ignited within me that had been smoldering in the depths of my heart. Don't give up, Natalie. You want to keep working, right? Yeah, but if guests don't come, we can't keep running the inn. Don't worry, I'll write an article about it. I had never really wanted to write an article on my own accord before. I'd just been going with the flow, covering whatever was popular or trending at the time, and visiting tourist spots out of calculation. But now it was different. I wanted to share the charm of my humble, small hometown charms only I knew about with someone else. That makes me happy. You're still you, Matt. You've always helped me out, even if you grumble about it. That's because you helped me first, Natalie. I'm grateful for that. Yeah, I'm glad you've been my childhood friend. It felt refreshing to be able to express feelings I couldn't before I left the island 16 years later. The next day, I asked my classmates and parents about the charms of the island and visited the natural wonders we were proud of. After returning to the city, I energetically started working on the production of a travel magazine. From selecting photographs to writing articles, for the first time in a long time, I did everything myself. There were days when it was physically difficult due to the constant overtime work, but several junior members of the team helped me with miscellaneous tasks and offered me food, which made me feel once again grateful for the team. Matt, could you come to the conference room for a sec? A week after publication, I was called by my boss again. This month's article was really good. The interviews felt authentic, and the features hook was excellent. Really, it seems inquiries to the place have increased. Well done, Matt. Thank you. Receiving words of praise for the first time in years, I hugged the travel magazine, my work of pride, to my chest. With the help of Natalie, Jake, my classmates, and my parents, I was able to write the article. I was able to savor the beauty of my hometown and the joy of my work anew. It was that rural island that changed me. And now, I want to visit Natalie's Inn again, not as a journalist, but as a dear friend.